Hi, I just wanted to do a quick walkthrough uh, on this piece I wrote a few months ago for a theater play that premiered in Germany and is called Tempesta, which means tempest. So, what the director was looking for was something very powerful, with a lot of impact. So, I was thinking about, large orchestra type of sequence. So I just want to show you my track layout and few things that I used here in this specific piece because this could be useful for your orchestral piece. So first of all, in this particular piece, I wanted to use a variety of libraries, and so I used really probably 3 or 4 different libraries. For example, for some of the strings, as you can see, I divided my strings in um, rather than violins sections and viola sections and so on. I divided more in terms of like the type of sound that I wanted, and basically I end up with some high strings and low strings, and basically I have some low spiccato and basses, and then I have some more violin spiccato and some violin runs. And some of these libraries, again, as I said, I used a combination of libraries, and some of these libraries are things that you're more familiar with. For example, I used some LA strings for my spiccato. So these are the LA strings patterns. I love LA strings uh, specifically for this pattern that you can trigger with just a simple key. So you play the chord, and then you have different patterns that can be triggered. So for example, in this case, if I look at my spiccato, I can just play a chord, and by holding down my sustain pedal, right? So the pattern is generated automatically. Same thing for low spiccato. So these are very useful. I also have some violin runs, and so for some of the parts, I used another library which is made by Sonokinetic, and those libraries are very useful for fast things that you need to sequence quickly. They are phrase based, but I love them because, as I said, they're really easy to use, and they provide a lot of quick phrase-based sequencing that, of course, you will still tweak, but they're very useful. So Sonokinetic is a great library for that. Um, I also used harp, and as we discussed last class, um, I used a regular harp for just some simple arpeggio, but I also have some chords that I used here and there for glissandos, right? And so if I just solo my harp, so I have some just regular, right, arpeggio like that, but then I have some glissando. And if you remember, I used my transposer to create those scales. So that's very useful. I also have some woodwinds. Oh, and by the way, the harp was from Vienna. So I used some woodwinds, and for woodwinds I used a combination of Vienna. This is just a regular Vienna bassoon, where I used my automation, as we know, right? Let me just open it up here with the usual automation with modulation, right, to change our dynamics. I used sustain legato patch, like we learned a few weeks ago, and also I used a woodwind patch that is from the Sonokinetic library. Quick woodwind ensemble that allows me to really create some nice pads and some nice interesting parts. Right, so those are phrase pads. So they're fairly natural. They sound good. I like them. They're easy to use. In terms of brass, I used a combination of the tuba from actually East-West. I like the big impact that East-West has, and so I used their tuba, and I also used their basses. So for string basses. So, but for tuba, I used two things. I used effects and just a regular sustained tuba, and then I used also tree trumpet for some effects. Again, East-West is great for big impact type of situations. I love the low brass. They sound good. They're very powerful and easy to use. And then I have many percussions here. And again, it's a combination of Vienna. So I have percussions and gong and bass drum and gongs for Vienna, and timbs also from Vienna. And then I have a bunch of percussions from Sonokinetic. They have some really good percussions that are very powerful. And then I have some basic cymbals from the vintage Vienna in the Contact library, and specifically I use the scrape cymbals. They sound like this. I love those scrape cymbals, you know, very texture, you know, driven, and you know, they're just like colors. They're like ear candies that I put here and there for a piece like this. I have some piano, basic Bosendorfer piano hole from Logic, and then I used this very interesting library, which is Sonic Choirs from East-West, with a word builder that allows me to actually punch in phrases and preset phrases, or you can punch in your own to create some very realistic choirs. So for example, let me show you the interface of word builder, but it's really cool. This is an example, right, where I can go into word builder and build my own phrases using some sort of phonetics or this way of writing, which is called Votox, which is specifically designed for the symphonic choirs. But what that allows me to do is to trigger phrases for a big choir. For example, right, so very realistic, and I have the same thing for female voices. And so I can come out with any chord, any phrase, and it's really cool how you can do this, right? So again, let me open the player so you're gonna see it. So these are the phrases that I'm triggering. So that provided the perfect, very dramatic backdrop for a piece like this. And as you can see, I organize my tracks by color, and I color code them. You can choose your own color code, but with so many tracks, it's very easy to get lost, and so I just needed to make it easy for me. I also have pads. I have a couple of pads that are Alchemy from Logic. The pads just provide the low drone that I was looking for, right? So basically, with all this going, the piece that is not mixed, right? This is just from the MIDI tracks, sounds like this. Bassoon and harp, right? Female voices. Percussion from Sonokinetic. Harp from VSL. Cymbals. Voices from symphonic choirs. Piano, Bosendorfer. Woodwinds in the background. So as you can see, with a fairly limited number of tracks, I could build something pretty big, pretty majestic. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the way I use software synthesizer, like for example Contact or even Play, is by taking advantage of the environment, and where I create some multi-instruments that are channeling my MIDI information to the actual virtual instrument. So as you can see, I have multi-instrument receiving MIDI channels and MIDI data and sending them to the different type of instrument. For example, the Play here for my choirs, right? And then the Contact, I have 3 instances of Contact here. And that makes layering and makes organizing my tracks way easier. I'll make a video on how to do this later, but just to show you the layout. Okay. Now, after I have all my MIDI tracks and I'm happy with the sequencing, for a piece like this, in order to mix it correctly, I make stems. So I made audio stems of the most important elements. So I have a tutti effects that happens, in the second part of the piece. I have the high strings, which is violins and viola, my low strings, which is bass and the cellos. I have my woodwinds all together. I have tims and toms. I have cymbals. I have high brass and low brass. I have a harp. I have the pads. I have a piano. I have voices rise, which is like an effect. And then I have my 3 choirs. And so by doing so, to me, it's way easier to mix it, especially because I'm going to use a 6 reverb approach. So 6 zone reverb approach. And at this point, I can just focus on my audio tracks rather than having to deal with separate output that can be a little bit confusing. Okay, so basically now I would just mute all my audio, all my MIDI tracks, sorry. So now I have my audio tracks playing, right? All my stems. And this makes it way easier to mix, because if I look at my mixing board here, these are all my stems, right? From Tutti effects to female voices. And what I did is to create 6 zone reverbs plus an extra zone for my choir. And I assigned, as we learned before, right, each track to different zones. So my strings are in zone 1 and 2, my woodwinds 3 and 4, my timbs and cymbals, percussion 5 and 6, and so on. The only exception is that for the 3 choirs, I used a special reverb just to give them more realistic room of their own. So now the mixing is way easier. I can control my return of the reverbs right here, and I have my sends here, and I can control the automation and the volume right here. Just look at how I pan the reverbs, right? So zone 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they're panned. 5 and 6 are the ones in the back that I assigned to brass and percussion. 3 and 4 are for my woodwinds and my tutti effects, and 1 and 2 are for my strings. I put the harp on 5 and 6, where it should be in the back, and also the piano, since the piano was more like a sound effect really. There were clusters. I just put it back in the back of the orchestra. So that's how I organize it. And then once I have this ready, I can just bounce it. So as you can see, it's fairly simple, but just wanted to do a walkthrough how I operate. Hope you find this useful.